Hello everyone, my name is Brady, and this is my Warhammer 40k dedicated channel, Almost Pro Gaming. I am doing a series of guides for Warhammer 40k, and I'm starting from the very basics and working my way up to tactics and strategy and competitive list building. In my last video, I gave a brief introduction of myself and why I think I can help you learn 40k. The video is also about what you need in order to play 40k, so if listening to either of those things interests you, please feel free to check out that video. With that said, let's get into the topics of today's guide. Today we'll be discussing two things. The first thing is how to accurately read your codex and what all the numbers on the unit profile mean, what a unit is, and so on. Again, starting from the basics and moving our way up. The next part of our video, we will be discussing how to properly build an army list to play a game of Warhammer 40k using faction keywords and detachments. Right now, I will put up the timestamps to each part so you can fast forward yourself to the section you wish to watch. There's not much strategy in this video for you veterans, but if you're interested in the strategy aspect of 40k, don't worry, those videos are coming soon. Check back on the channel in a day or two and I should have at least a couple. So let's talk about how to properly read your codex or index, and what all the stats for your little dudes mean. Let's take a look at a unit profile. Most of the stuff is pretty self-explanatory. First off, I need to explain what a unit is. A unit is a number of models that are in one group. For an example, you can have a unit of 5 Tactical Marines, or a unit of 1 Rhino, or a unit of 5 Terminators. Characters count as a unit even though they are only one model. They are just a one model unit. Same with vehicles and monsters. You can check the appropriate codex index to see how many models fit into each unit. So with that said, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Under where it says name is the name of the unit we are looking at. This is a MV-71 sniper drone. The next thing I'd like you to look at are the stats directly to the right of the unit's name. These are the unit's base stats. So if anyone asks, what's your base X? Meaning like what's your base attacks, what's your base health? They are asking about these statistics right here. So going from left to right, the M is for movement. This is how many inches you may move each model in a unit in a turn. Remember, movement is per model, so measure for every model you move. The WS stands for weapon skill. This is the roll you need in order to hit an enemy in close combat, hand-to-hand combat, or punching dudes. So in this case, the drone would need to roll 5 pluses in order to hit the enemy. A 5 plus means when you roll a 5 or anything higher. So in this case, rolls of 5 or 6 would count as hits. The BS is the unit's ballistic skill. This is what the unit hits on for rolls when making shooting attacks with their weapons. So in this case, the drone hits on 5s. The S stands for strength. This is how hard your unit punches other people in close combat. There's a chart in the rulebook that teaches you how to compare this stat to the enemy's toughness in order to see if you successfully wounded them. The T stands for toughness. This is the number you compare your opponent's unit's strength to when they try to punch you in close combat to see if they wound you. Again, there is a chart in the rulebook that easily explains what rolls you need in order to wound based off of strength versus toughness. The W stands for wounds. This is how much damage each model in your unit can suffer before they die. So in this case, the drone has 1 wound per model, meaning in order to kill this drone, you need to do 1 damage to it. The A stands for attacks. A lot of newcomers confuse this number to be the amount of shooting attacks the unit gets, and this is not the case. This number is strictly for close combat attacks. This number is how many punches you can do when trying to punch somebody to death. So in this case, the drone only gets to take 1 swing at his target if he's in close combat. If there are 5 drones in the unit, then all of them get to make their 1 attack, so you'd get 5 attacks. The LD is leadership. Your units have a chance to get scared and run away in 40k, and some scare easier than others. It's usually not likely unless they take heavy casualties though. You can learn how to do a morale check in the big rulebook. The SV is a unit's save. This is the roll you need in order to not be wounded by an attack your opponent has made. There are other things that affect this that I will go over, but this generally is the number you want to roll in order to save yourself. So in this drone's case, its save is 4+. So that means if this drone fights another drone and happens to hit and wound it with their rolls, the wounded drone gets to take its 4+ save in order to try to deny the damage. And you must make a save for every wound. So if you're wounded 4 times, you take 4 saves. Any of those dice that you rolled, if they're a 4+, you're good. Underneath all those stats, there is a small section that explains how many models you can take in this unit and what weapons the unit is equipped with. Underneath that section, you will see weapon profiles of the weapons the unit is equipped with. In this case, the drones come with a long-shot pulse rifle. Now this rifle has some stats of its own, so let's go over what these mean. The range is how far the gun can shoot, so in this case, it is 48 inches, which is fairly long. The type of weapon is kind of tricky to explain. It gives off the type of weapon, but also lets you know how many shots the weapon has if it is not a melee weapon. So, if this weapon says heavy 6, that means it shoots 6 heavy shots. There's a bit more to it, but you can learn all of that stuff in the rulebook. The S on the weapon profile is the strength of the weapon, just like the S on your actual unit's profile. So when you make an attack with the weapon, you compare the weapon's strength to the toughness of the target. So when you're punching people, you compare your strength. But it doesn't matter how strong you are to pull a trigger of the gun, it doesn't make the gun any stronger. The gun will still remain at its own strength. So your gun has its own strength for when you shoot people with it, and you have your own strength for when you're punching people in the face. The AP is the armor piercing that the weapon is capable of. Remember the save stat we talked about earlier? This statistic modifies that number. So let's say the drone is being shot by a -2 AP gun and it successfully wounds it. Then the drone minuses 2 from its save, which would mean it has a 6+ save now. So it would roll 6s to try to cancel out those wounds. The D on the weapon is damage. That is how much damage your weapon does if it wounds its target. So in this instance on the long shot stats, the damage is 1, meaning every wound that is successful and unsaved by your opponent with the saving throws, you will do 1 damage for every wound inflicted. So if you did 1 wound, that would equal 1 damage. The damage does not carry over from model to model. Wounds carry over, but damage is only per model. Lots of weapons include tons of different abilities. Some give extra attacks, some do more damage, some make your wound rolls easier. The point is, weapons usually come with some abilities that change the way the weapon is used and usually makes them unique. The abilities underneath the weapon stats are the unit's abilities. Not going to go over them too much because I want to get to the main purpose of this video, which is how to build an army. But the abilities do certain things that make the unit unique. Most abilities do something really cool and different in order to make the unit stand out. The last things I want to talk about is the most important parts of this lesson, the faction keywords. Faction keywords are how you figure out what units go with what other units. This is how you make your army. You base your army off of these keywords. So an example, this unit has the faction keywords Tau Empire and Sept. This means you can have a Tau Empire army or a Sept army, as long as every unit in your army has that faction keyword in common. Now the last couple things you need to know about this unit, one is on the page and another one is actually in the back of your book. So on the page, if you look in the top left, there'll be a power level of your unit. Power levels aren't used in match play too much because they're not necessarily balanced. Power levels are meant for pickup games for people who don't necessarily have a lot of models and they're just showing up at a store hoping to get a game in with somebody. If you're playing against a friend and you're going to be playing a lot, you guys are going to want to do points, which are located in the back of your codex or index. So you have to add up all the points for each of your unit in order to make a list. So if you agree on, let's say, a 50 power level list for casual, then you would add a bunch of units together until you end up getting 50 power level. You do not go over it, you can be under it though, but you try to get as close to 50 as possible. So if you're making a points list, you do the same thing, but you choose an amount of points. A normal game of 40k is around 1,500 to 2,000 points, which is a decent amount, but that's not stopping you from playing 500 point games, or even anything smaller if you really wanted to. So now, with all that said, let's get into how to properly make an army list. So 8th edition is really cool in how you can make an army list. Because of the way faction keywords work, you can actually make a bunch of cool and unique armies now. For example, there are tons of units in the game that share the Imperium faction keyword, meaning you can make a dedicated Imperium army. This wasn't allowed in previous editions, and you were forced to play very specific and narrow armies, like Blood Angels or Space Wolves. Unless you allied in Blood Angels with your Space Wolves, you couldn't really play them in together, and it made things kind of wonky. But in this edition, you can say your army is Imperium, and you can use a detachment of Space Wolves alongside a detachment of Blood Angels because they share the Imperium keyword. So here's where things start getting a little confusing for new players and veterans alike. You can make what is known as a soup army, because you literally just throw a bunch of stuff in the soup and hope it tastes good. When you make an army list, you decide what your overall army faction keyword is. This can be anything without any penalties. And when you make individual detachments to put in that list, you can choose another keyword for those detachments. It can be the exact same or different. As long as every unit in the detachment share at least one keyword with everything in their own detachment and have a shared keyword with their overall army, it works. So yeah, a little confusing, but let me try to explain this by giving you an example. I want to play a Chaos army, so my faction keyword is Chaos. So now, I can only use units that have the Chaos keyword in my army. So now I want to make a patrol detachment. If you need to know what the detachments are, refer to the main rulebook. Every army uses the same ones. So I must choose a keyword for my patrol detachment. This time, I'm going to choose the keyword Death Guard. So only Death Guard units can go in this detachment, but all Death Guard still share the Chaos keyword, so now I can add more detachments that also have the Chaos keyword. So now I want to add another patrol detachment, but this time of Thousand Suns. Everything in the Thousand Suns detachment shares the Thousand Suns keyword, so they can all be together, but they also share the Chaos keyword, making these two detachments a valid Chaos army. Now if you really wanted, you could say the army is Chaos and all the detachments are Chaos, and that would be totally fine. You could have one detachment that had Thousand Suns units and Death Guard units in it, and that would be valid because everything shares the Chaos keyword. This is called a soup detachment. Soup detachments are okay, but you lose on an army-specific stratagem and traits if you do this. For most armies, this isn't a problem because you don't have a codex yet, meaning you don't have traits and stratagems to lose out on. So there are no downsides to soup armies that don't own codexes. But for something like Space Marines who have stratagems and traits, you only get access to them if they're in a completely Space Marine detachment. That doesn't mean they have to be in a completely Space Marine army. As long as they're in a completely Space Marine detachment, they are okay and they get their traits and stuff. So again, you can have an Imperium army that still gets all of its traits, but you just have to have everything in its own detachment. So all your sub-factions, keep them in their own detachments, while your bigger, broader factions like Imperium can be your army keyword. Well anyways, that's going to be it for this video. I hope I didn't confuse you too much, and if I did, please post any comments and let me know your concerns, and I will try to answer any questions to the best of my abilities. I am here to help you and help you learn 40k, so any questions are welcomed with open arms. So please let me know in the comments if you have any questions, or if you just want to learn something else, anything specific. Please post your ideas and I will try to get to every one that I can, and I will make more videos in the future based off of what you guys want. But for now, it looks like in the next video, I'm actually going to be getting into a little bit of strategy, but still aiming more towards the newer people. And that's going to be which starter set boxes give you the best bang for your buck. So that's going to be the next video, so if you want to learn about that, tune in for the next one. Well anyways, I hope I was able to help you learn something, and if you did and would like to learn more, feel free to subscribe for more Warhammer 40k tutorials. Remember, I'm going to be doing much more strategy in the future. I'm just starting from the beginning and moving my way up, that way I can catch everyone up to speed. So thanks again for watching guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I see you in the next video. Happy wargaming!